Thank you. There will be yelling. Yes, this is, I usually lose my voice by the end of the day when I'm telling these stories. Okay. So here we go with these stories. Hey, don't ruin my scissors, please. Okay, put them on. We're not using them today. All right, so here we go. This is the most terrified I've ever been in my life. And this is the most I've ever terrified another human being in my life. And then there's one story I'm going to tell at the beginning that's just kind of fun. You know, you guys are seventh graders. You're at an age where it's kind of interesting because at some point in your life, you start transitioning from little kid things to more adulty type things. And one of those is like Halloween. You know, anybody can trick or treat, and there's not any real like limits or whatever. But there's also a point in your life where you're like, you know, I'm not as interested in trick or treating as I am passing out candy or staying home, things like that. And that is a slow transition into adulthood, right? Lorenzo, put your mask on, please. So, for example, this year, my two sons, they're 6th and 7th grade. Like, I think they're reaching that point. I have my younger one went out for over 3 hours. My older son went for really more like 45 minutes. And I think my younger son will start transitioning that way too. This is a story about when that transition happened for me. And I had this sort of like aha moment where I realized that probably my funnest Halloween ever was when I finally decided to stop trick-or-treating and stay home. Please don't talk over my stories. So, this is what happened. I got home from school. My sister was going to be gone all evening at a student council party because she was on student council. And my parents said some words to me that are some of the most, I think you guys will agree with me. These are some of the most frightening words that parents will ever say to children. And the thing they said to me was this. Greg, why don't you come into the kitchen table? Your mom and I want to talk to you. Okay. You guys know as well as I do, this is a really, really bad situation when your parents say that, right? So I said, oh crap, what have I done, right? So I go walking in and I sat down, but it was actually good news. My dad said, did you decide if you're going to go trick-or-treating this year or not? And I said, I don't know. I still haven't really decided yet. And he said, well, this is what your mom and I were thinking. He said, we would really like to go to this Halloween event that the school's doing for the faculty. He said, but we would be gone all evening. And as you know, your sister's gone. So you would be in charge of the house all yourself. And it's Halloween night, so there will be a lot to do. You'd have to pass out a lot of candy. Are you okay with doing that? And you know, I hadn't been able to stay at home alone very often up to that point. And so they were really trusting me. And I was like, yeah, I think I will. I'm not going to go trick-or-treating this year. I'm going to stay home and pass out candy. They're like, okay, great. Well, we didn't have cell phones back then. They were like, here's the phone number of the house we will be at. Call us if you need any help. The neighbors across the street can also help you if you need. So it was all cool. And I felt really proud that they were trusting me like that. So my parents left and I was home alone. And Halloween night was still ahead, right? And I was like, oh, this is great. And then I hatched a plan. And I don't think to this day, I don't think my parents have ever heard about this plan that I did. But this is what happened. Instead of just passing out candy, I got a little bit evil with this, okay? And I decided to do this. I went to my dad's closet and I got out all of his like grungy work clothes, and where he works on his car or worked on the yard or stuff like that. And I got them out and I stuffed them full of leaves and I made these really cool scarecrows, right? My mom had these cloth sacks and I filled them with leaves. And I made 6 or 7 of these scarecrows and I sort of laid them all over the porch. And so there's all these scarecrows like laying like this on the porch. It almost looked like a closet at a clothing store full of like mannequins that have been thrown in there, right? It looked like that. Scarecrows everywhere. And then I put these clothes on myself as well, and I stuffed them full of leaves, and I put one of those masks on my head, and then I wrote a sign on, and I put it on the door that said, welcome trick-or-treaters. We are not here tonight, but help yourself to one piece of candy from the tray on the front porch swing. And so then I put that sign up there, and I put one of the dummy scarecrows on the front porch swing, and he's like in there like this. And then I put a tray of candy, and then I did the same thing. I sat on the front porch swing, And I was like all limp, like I was just a scarecrow as well. And the costume was really good. You couldn't tell. And so I waited, and I waited, and I waited, and I waited, and I heard that noise that I've told you before, that noise that just, I hate this noise. It is the sound, it's the reason I became a teacher, was to eliminate this noise forever from the world. The sound of children's laughter, okay? You all have heard me say that before. So, I heard the sound of children's laughter, and I realized, okay, the trick-or-treaters are coming. So I laid there in my costume and waited. Kid came up to the front door, first trick-or-treat, rings the doorbell, rings it again, rings it a third time, and then reads the sign. He's like, oh, there's a sign there. And then he looks over and sees the candy on the front porch swing. So he comes over and he looks, picks up a piece of candy, puts it in his thing, walks off and leaves. Never knew I was sitting there. And I was like, okay, that's successful. Second kid comes up, rings the doorbell, rings the doorbell, rings the doorbell, then reads the sign. That was a recurring theme all night, okay? And then he looked over at the front porch swing, and he's like, oh. And he comes over, looks, picks out a piece, puts it in his thing, walks off. Never knew I was there. Mission successful. About 4 or 5 kids into it. You guys know what's coming. About 4 or 5 kids into it, this is what happened. Kid walks up, rings the doorbell, reads the sign, sees the candy, goes over, picks up a piece of candy, and then he did this. He goes. And he reached for more candy, right? A whole handful. Like he was scooping a whole handful of candy out of there, okay? As soon as he reached for that second handful of candy, I went from limp scarecrow to, I grabbed his wrist, okay? Grabbed his wrist. I did not expect what happened next, okay? I thought I would scare him a little. I did not expect what actually happened. He looked like he had stuck his entire hand into an electrical socket, okay? I mean, his whole body went, like that, right? And I was like, oh my gosh, and I let go of his hand, and he fell to the ground, okay? He had a bag full of candy, and when I grabbed him, his bag of candy goes, ah! Like that, and like candy went all over the porch, okay? So there's candy like raining down, okay? And he fell to the ground, and he's like, ah! Like he's backing away from me on the ground. And I didn't know what to do. So I guess what I did in the next made it worse. Like, all I did was I just stood up, right? But when I stood up, he's like, no, like that, right? And he backs off of the porch, gets up, leaves his candy there, and runs away, right? Runs down the driveway. And funny postscript note to this, as he ran down the driveway, there was another kid who was walking up about to trick or treat, and this kid's like, ah! Right by him. And the kid walking up is like, and he turned around, like he's like, nope, not gonna do it, right? So I was like, dang, that kid was really terrified, right? And you enjoyed this. That was not the story of the most I've ever scared someone, okay? That is still coming in a subsequent story, okay? But now I'm going to tell you the story of the time when I was the most terrified I've ever been in my life, okay? And so this is about a year or two later, and I'm about 14 or 15 years old. And, all right, so I got to stop and tell you something here. There is a phrase that you will hear in my stories sometimes. And when you hear this phrase, it means things are about to get really jacked up, okay? So the phrase is this: me and my friend Joe. Anytime you hear a story that I tell, and the first part of the story goes like, me and my friend Joe, you know that stuff's about to get really weird, okay? So there was a class I had 3 or 4 years ago. Every time I tell a story and I go, well, me and my friend Joe, and they would go, ooh, like they knew weird stuff was about to happen. And it was kind of funny. In fact, y'all can try that. Are you ready? Me and my friend Joe. Yeah. And so one time, Joe still lives here in Yukon. One time, me and Joe went to lunch. We still go to lunch sometimes. And he came here to the school to pick me up. And he came in the doorway, and we were in here working on something. And Joe goes, and so anyway, my kid said, Mr. Buncher's somebody at the doorway. And I was like, oh, hi. All right, I'm finishing up. And my kids were like, who's that? And I said, oh, that's my friend Joe. And they were all like, that's Joe? And I was like, yeah, that's Joe.
I'm sure you
and my friends were like, oh my God. And so they were looking at him like, so that's Joe? And I was like, yeah, that's Joe. And Joe goes, dude, what have you been telling them about me, right? And I said, well, I've been telling them stories from when you and I were teenagers. And he goes, yeah, that makes sense. So anyway, me and my friend Joe, we were riding our bikes. It was nighttime. It was dark. We were riding our bikes around Yukon. You may be aware of this, but there's a big giant building in Yukon called the Mill. It's on Main Street. And behind it, south of it, there's this grassy area where people park their cars a lot. But back when I was a kid, that area was not a grassy area. There was a big building there also. There were two buildings right next to each other. And I'm not talking about the mill that's across the street, the co-op either. I'm talking about the Yukon Flour Mill. And right behind it, there was a red brick building that was 6 stories tall. And it used to be connected to the mill. But when the mill went out of business, that red brick building was abandoned. It became an abandoned building. And on the ground floor of it, they put boards up. They nailed boards up around the doors and the windows and all that kind of stuff, and they condemned the building, okay? So Joe and I were riding our bikes, and it was dark, and the full moon was out, so we could see a little bit. And we were riding around that building, that abandoned building, and it was kind of creepy looking, and we're looking at it going, whoa, and some of the windows were broken out and all this kind of stuff. And so anyway, we got around to the back side of it, and on the back side of it, one of the doors that had a board like nailed over it to nail it shut, one of those boards had been ripped open. And so of course, Joe and I were like, hey, it'd be really cool to go inside this building. Nothing could possibly go wrong, right? So the opening was just pretty narrow, and it was kind of scary because there were all these nails in the board to get in. But we kind of like squeezed past it, and we were able to get inside the building. And on the ground floor, it was really creepy because all the windows had been boarded up, so it was super dark in there. It smelled like a cellar, like it was old and musty. But as we stood in there for a minute, and our eyes like adjusted to the darkness, and we noticed that there was a staircase over to the side of us. So we went over the staircase, and we started going up. What we wanted to do was get on top of the building so we could see out over Yukon, right? So we went up these stairs, up these stairs, up these stairs. And when we got up to the second floor, it got better because there were windows. And like I said, it was a full moon. So the moonlight was coming in through the windows, but you couldn't see the floor. It was still dark down there, but you could at least see the other walls in the room and stuff and kind of know where everything was. So we went all the way up to the top, same thing. Couldn't see the floor at all. Couldn't see anything below our knees, like it was darkness down there. But at eye level, we could see things. And so we started walking out around the floor, and it looked really cool. Like you could see Main Street and little cars driving that. Like you were way up in the air. It was a really cool view of Yukon. You could see all the water towers with the lights blinking. You could see every house in Yukon, like house lights and stuff all over the place. It was a really cool view. And so we walked out about, 10 or 15 steps out into this floor, and then we both screamed. And the reason we both screamed is because there was noise all around us, okay? And we didn't know what it was, terrifying noise. So we were both like, ah! And then we realized that it was wings flapping all around us. And at first I thought bats, right? But it wasn't bats. What we had done was we had walked into a whole group of pigeons. And these pigeons lived in this building, and they slept at night, like on the floor in there, and we couldn't see them because it was dark down there. And so these pigeons like flew all around us, and we were like, ah! And so anyway, then they flew all around in the room, which was really weird. And then there was this broken window, and they flew out the broken window and started flying around the building, okay?
That would have been something.
And so at that point, we decided, okay, maybe we better get out of here because that was kind of scary. And then your brilliant and intelligent teacher, Greg Bunch, it was that moment when my brilliant mind remembered, hey, I've got a flashlight in my backpack. And I said to Joe, hey, I've got a flashlight in my backpack. And Joe was like, dude, like we've been fumbling around in the dark and you've got a flashlight, get it out. And so I put the backpack down and I felt around in there and there was my flashlight. But the problem is in my backpack, that flashlight always got like accidentally turned on. And so the batteries on it were crazy low. So I turned it on and the light got real bright at first, but then it got really, really dim. And you could barely see with it, but you can still see a little bit, right? So we turned it on and we looked around the room and it was really like there was dust everywhere, pigeon poop everywhere. There was like things that had been knocked over and stuff on the ground. And then we turned around and started walking back to the stairs. And that's when we saw something that was really scary. As we were walking back to the stairs, we could see our footprints in the dust where we had come from the stairs over to where we were. And so we were retracing them. And as we were retracing them, we saw something right next to our footsteps. And the thing we saw was a huge 6-foot wide hole in the floor. And we went to the edge of the floor of the hole and looked down, and the hole went all the way down 60 feet to the ground, okay? I don't know if it was a elevator shaft or, you know, something where they used to put wheat or something, and I don't know what it was, but it was a hole in the floor that went all the way down to the ground, 60 feet down. And we realized in the dark that we had walked right by that hole, probably that far by it, and we never had any idea what was there. If we had turned just slightly the wrong way, I would not be here today, okay? So when we saw that, Joe and I were like, okay, maybe this wasn't such a great idea, right? We realized buildings are abandoned for a reason, and it was not smart for us to be in there. I'm not even to the scariest part. So I'm not gonna lie, Joe and I were like, we're manly men, right? But we were kind of standing close to each other now because we were a little bit frightened, okay? So we walked over to the stairs and we took one step down the stair and I froze. And Joe goes, what's wrong? And I said, what is that? And Joe looked and he goes, is that? And I said, it looks like blood. And he goes, yeah, it does look like blood. And I said, okay, well, one of us must have cut ourselves accidentally when we were coming in that door with all those nails, remember I told you about? I said, one of us must have accidentally cut ourselves and we didn't feel it, but we're bleeding. And Joe goes, okay. And I said, well, let me check and find out where you're bleeding. So I looked all over Joe, you know, all up and down. He's not bleeding anywhere. I said, okay, you check me. So he looked all over me, up and down, head to toe. I'm not bleeding anywhere. I said, well, you're not bleeding and I'm not bleeding, but someone's bleeding. Oh. And so he said, yeah. He said, maybe it's not blood. And I know this is gross, but at this point I had to touch it and it was liquid. And you know how blood has a smell? Yeah. And so I smelled it and I was like, that is definitely blood. And he's like, well, who's bleeding? And I said, well, it's not you and it's not me, but somebody is bleeding here. And so then we're kind of terrified. I'm not going to lie. Like we were really scared at that point. Okay. Because anyway, so we went down another step and there's another drop of blood. We went down another step and there's another drop of blood. And we realized that it wasn't just a drop of blood, that it was a blood trail. Okay. And so now I'm not going to lie, like Joe's voice was shaking, my voice was shaking, my hand was shaking. I might have had tears in my eyes. Like we were really, really, really scared. Okay. Because here's the thing, that blood trail went down the steps and it became pretty obvious by looking at it. There were places where it was smeared and stuff that whoever was bleeding had been dragged down these stairs, okay? Oh. That's what we realized. Because it was a blood trail, and there were trail marks, and whoever was bleeding was dragged down these stairs. And so Joe and I know we're both thinking the same thing. We were like, I've seen this movie before, and the teenager definitely dies in this movie, right? And I'm the teenager who's about to die in this movie, okay? I'm like, I've seen this, and this does not end well for the shaky little 15-year-old with a flashlight that's about to go dead going down the stairs, right? And I'm not gonna lie, Joe and I had our arms around each other, okay? Because we were really scared. And I was like, we just need to get out of here. I even thought about breaking the windows out and jumping out of the window. And I know that would have resulted in at least resulted in breaking both my legs. But I was like, 2 broken legs is better than dying, because we were 100% convinced we were gonna die, okay? So we went down the stairs, and as we went down the stairs, there were more drops of blood. It increased, whoever was bleeding, it got worse as they went down the stairs. And I mean, we were out of our minds terrified, okay? So we got down to the bottom floor, the dark room, right? And this is where you guys realize that I'm telling you the truth. When I tell these stories, I'm not making these up. This is a true story. Because in the movie, the teenager follows the blood trail and gets killed, right? Yeah. I mean, when we were walking down those stairs, I'm not kidding you. We would take a step or two, and then we would look around. Because I'm like, where is the machete going to come from, right? I know I'm going to hear this chainsaw go, and then it's going to come right at me, right? And so I'm like looking for where the murderer is going to get, right? So we get down to the bottom, and the blood trail goes this way to the darkest part of this room. And the way out is right here to our left. And the way that you know that this is a true story is this. We went out the door and left, and we never found out who was bleeding down there, okay?
Oh, sweet glory.
You want to save a
now,
lost child.
I have told this story hundreds of times over the years, and I think I may have an idea, though, what it was, okay? So I think what it could be is there were pigeons on the top floor. There were probably wild animals that lived in this abandoned building, raccoon, wildcat, something like that. And those pigeons would have been like a buffet line for any wild animal, right? Like a cat could easily sneak up there, creep up on a pigeon, kill the pigeon, drag the pigeon back down the stairs. Pigeon bleeds everywhere, right? And so I've thought about it over the years as I've told this story many times, and I'll bet you that's the correct explanation to the blood trail. But I'm telling you, at the time, in our 15-year-old imaginations, we were totally convinced that we were about to die. That is the most scared I've ever been in my life. We were absolutely terrified, okay? Which leads me to my third story, the time when we terrified someone else the most they've ever been terrified in their lives, okay? Not me grabbing a kid by the wrist on the porch. It's a little worse than that. So, fast forward to senior year. Shh. Senior year. Shh. I'm going to run out of time. Senior year. I'm a senior at the high school. This is the building we were at. We were at the high school building. Me and my friend Joe. Only 2 people did it. Let's try that again. Me and my friend Joe. Okay. You know stuff's going to get crazy when Joe's involved. But me and my friend Joe and my friend Matt and my friend John. Okay. So there were 4 of us. And the 4 of us had girlfriends. And our 4 girlfriends were all friends with each other.
Wait, what?
So the 8 of us, all 4 of us and our 4 girlfriends, we used to go do stuff together all the time. And we would go to movies together. We'd go out to eat together, all that kind of stuff. And so anyway, we were having lunch together here in the cafeteria. And it was close to Halloween time. It was late October. And it was a Friday. We said, what are we going to do tonight? I don't know. We could go to a movie. We could go to this. And somebody said, hey, a friend of mine's having a Halloween party. I think we should go to the Halloween party. Yeah, that's a good idea. Let's go. And so we made a plan to go. And the way we were going to go was this. Joe drove this big black truck, and he was going to pick up the 4 girls. I don't remember why we had to do it this way, but we had to do it this way. So he had to pick up the 4 girls in his truck, and I was going to pick up John and Matt in my car, and we were going to meet at the party, and it was going to be fun and all this kind of stuff, okay? So that was the plan. And then we were like, all right, sounds good. Sounds like a plan. The girls got up and had to leave. They had to go back to class. And that's when the trouble really probably started, because that's when the plan started. Because someone said, hey, you know what'd be really funny? Let's pull a prank on our girlfriends and let's scare them because it's Halloween, right? So this was the plan that we decided to do, okay? I know what I'm about to say is really stupid. I'm aware that what I'm about to say is really, really stupid. But this is the truth. Back in those days, we teenagers used to convince ourselves that there was a place near Yukon, a field, a farmer's field, where you would not dare go out there, especially after dark, because that's where the quote unquote, the devil worshipers were, and they would snatch kids and kill them, right? And we used to tell that all the time. And everybody would be like, yeah, don't go out there, man. That's scary. And somebody would say, yeah, you remember that kid, remember that kid, Joey Williams? Yeah, you know how like he was here last year? And everyone's like, yeah. And you know he's not here anymore. They're like, yeah, Joey Williams doesn't go to school here anymore. They're like, yeah, he went out there and he was never seen again. And somebody's like, I heard he moved to Edmond schools. No, he got killed by the devil worshippers out in that field. And so I know it's stupid, but we kind of believed that, right? Like we believed it was really dangerous to go out there. So the prank we were going to pull was this. Joe was going to pick up the girls. He was going to, instead of driving to the party, he was going to drive, that's kind of rude, put your feet down, sweetie. So he was going to drive out to the devil worshiper field. And me and John and Matt were going to be dressed up in scary costumes. And we were going to like jump out and scare them, and it would be really funny. And then we would go to the party afterwards, right? So that was the plan. That was the prank. So after school, John and Matt and I, we had to get in our costumes. So we drove to my house. My parents were gone. My sister was gone, so we were there by ourselves. We put on my dad's grungy old clothes. We went down to the tool shed. I knew the combination to the lock on the tool shed. I opened the lock on the tool shed, and we decided to pick our weapons, right? We were going to be like really scary people, right? Now, John, my friend John, he was a wrestler. He was a big dude, got like broad shoulders, muscular, tall. And he had on a Jason Voorhees mask, which at that time, the Friday the 13th movies were kind of new. It's like the Friday the 13th.
Who is Jason Voorhees?
Friday the 13th movie.
The guy with the
Oh
Suck
my
a hockey
goodness,
mask.
I
Okay.
don't watch horror movies.
That's fine. So anyway, he had one of those masks. And immediately when I opened it, he saw this big axe. So some of them, Jason Voorhees has a machete, and some of them he has an axe. So John immediately grabbed the axe, and he looked good, man. Like he was big, and he had this axe and the scary mask. Hang on, save your questions for the end. And so anyway, he looked good. And I knew where my dad like hid his machete. So I got a machete, big long like blade, and I had on a scary mask too, and I looked pretty scary too. And Matt was like, you guys took all the good things. There's nothing left for me. And like, dude, just pick something. It doesn't matter. And he's like, how about a rake? And we're like, no, rake's not scary. And he's like, okay, well, dude, you guys took all the good ones. He's like, how about a weed eater? And we're like, no, that's not scary enough. And he's like, well, there's nothing scary left. And he's like, how about a chain? And I was like, yeah, chains are scary. He's like, okay, I found a chain. But this chain was like tiny, like the size of a necklace or something. And he's all like, rare. And we were like, okay, Matt, that's fine. You know, let's just go. So we went back to the house, and I got in trouble for this later. We dumped out a brand new bottle of ketchup in the sink, and we like smeared it all over ourselves, okay? So it looked like blood. And then we did something really stupid. As a 50-year-old, I thought about this later. This was a really bad choice. We got in my car and we drove across town. And the reason that was a bad choice is because we looked like we had just chopped somebody up and put the body in the trunk, okay? Like I'm literally driving the car and I have a mask on, blood all over me. Matt was in the passenger seat, blood all over him, mask on, and he's like twirling the chain like this. He's like, guys, look at this. And like, John is in the back seat, and he's like big shoulders, axe, blood all over him, Jason mask, right? And we're like arguing about, oh, is that song by Cheap Trick or by Bad Company, or who sings this song? INXS. No, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, we're arguing about music, right? We have no idea. People in all the cars around us are looking at us like this, right? Like, oh my God, there's murderers in that car, right? So, like, I can remember sitting at the intersection of Cornwell and Main Street and looking over at the family next to us, and they're all looking at us like, right? And I'm like, oh, maybe we should have rethought this, right? But if we had pulled up next to a police car, I'm convinced we would have gotten arrested right there and then, and this whole night wouldn't have happened. But here, we did not pull up next to a police car, and this is what happened. We went out to the quote-unquote devil worshiper place. By the way, you guys know where Love's is.
Yeah.
You keep driving west, and you go up this hill, and there's an abandoned building there. And it used to be a bar. And the person who owned that bar was not big on like fancy advertising. So instead of fancy advertising, he simply wrote on the side of his bar in huge letters, beer, okay? And eventually that bar went out of business, and someone who was a taxidermist bought it. Do you guys know what building I'm talking about? Some of you probably know where I'm talking about. And he changed the B to a D, and it said deer, okay? And then he went out of business, and now it's just an abandoned building up at the top of the road. It's out there near Frisco Ridge Homes. You guys know where I'm talking about. Anyway, you turn north, you go down a hill, you cross the train tracks, and then you get to the devil worshiper place, right? Where you definitely don't want to go there because you'll definitely die, right? So we drove out there, and we parked my car in a place where you couldn't see it from the road. And we got out, and then only then did we realize we didn't make a very good plan because the road was kind of long. And John was like, how's Joe going to know where to stop? Like, how's he going to know where we are hiding? And I was like, that's a really good question. I don't know. And so we talked about it for a little bit. We decided to put a roadblock in the middle of the road, right? So Joe would know to stop his truck there, and we would jump out and scare our friends in. So we looked for a roadblock. We finally found this huge piece of plywood, right? A sheet of plywood, and it was laying in the ditch, and it had graffiti spray painted all over it. And we were like, oh, that's perfect. And we picked it up, and on the face down side, in huge letters on it was written, Satan rules. And when we saw that, we were all like, but pretty quickly we were like, okay, that's okay, because it fits with our prank, right? We can use this as part of our prank. So we're not scared. So we stood it up in the middle of the road, but it fell down. There was a little bit of a breeze, and that was the problem. So it fell down. So we got a stick, stood it up again, propped it up with a stick, it fell down again. So we're like, dude, it's not gonna work. And so John, who was kind of a take charge kind of a guy, he's a FBI agent today down in southern Oklahoma. But anyway, John said, okay, here's the plan. And he goes, I'm gonna kneel down in the road. He's like, I'm gonna lean the sign against me and I'll hide behind the sign. That way I'll keep it propped up. Shh, stop talking over me, both of you. And so he said, I'm gonna prop it up. He said, and I'm gonna stay hidden until you guys give me the signal. And we were like, what's the signal? He's like, just yell really loud, and that'll be the signal, and I'll jump up. And then we're like, okay, this is perfect. So what we're gonna do, Joe will stop at the sign. The sign's really scary. Matt and I will jump out of the bushes, rawr, and everybody else gets scared. And then when you hear us jump out, you're gonna jump up in front of the car, and they're gonna be terrified, and it's gonna be perfect. We're like, oh my gosh, this is a great plan. So he kneels down behind the sign. Matt and I don't have a place to hide, so we have to walk up the road a little ways to find a hiding place. And so at this point, we are almost a whole football field away from John, about 300 yards, right? No, 100 yards, 300 feet. And so anyway, that's not a big deal. We can make this work. So we hid, and we waited, and we waited, and we waited. The sun went down. It got dark. It was a little chilly. Matt was like across the road from me in his hiding place, and he was like, Greg. And I was like, what? And he goes, what's taking him so long? And I said, I don't know. And he said, well, we didn't really tell him a time that he's supposed to come out of here. And I said, yeah, I know. And he goes, how long do you think it's going to take? And I said, I don't know. We'll just wait until it happens. And he goes, why are we whispering? And I was like, I don't know. It just feels like we should be whispering. He's like, okay. So we waited some more. Finally, I bet it was 45 minutes at least. It felt like a long time. Okay. So finally, up on the horizon, ding, headlights, big black truck, right? We're like, okay, it's happening. Oh my gosh, this is going to be so awesome. Oh my gosh. So I was like, okay, be in the places. And I started to yell at John that it was coming, but John was too far away. He wasn't going to hear me. So we waited. Oh my gosh, this is so cool. And he was driving, Joe was driving really slow. And so he came down the road. And as he got closer, I kept staring and I go, that's not a big black truck. And Matt goes, hey, Greg, I don't think that's Joe. And I was like, shh, just be quiet.
Oh.
And so we looked, and sure enough, as it came closer, it was a small green car, right? And we were hidden right next to the road. So literally from me to Death Street, like that car drove right by us, that close, right? And I just stayed hidden. And I still remember seeing, as I drove by, it was a teenage boy driving, teenage girl in the front seat. And I could still see their silhouettes as they drove by. They had no idea we were there. There's an El Reno High School sticker on their car. So I assumed they were high school students from El Reno, maybe, I don't know. So they drove right by, and Matt goes, what are we gonna do? And I said, I don't know, they're gonna see the sign and it's gonna freak them out and they're gonna leave. And Matt's like, yeah, I bet you're right, okay. I said, just stay hidden. So we stayed hidden. They drove up to the sign and they stopped. Headlights right on the sign. Satan rules in big letters on it, right? And they're just sitting there staring at it. And I'm going, come on, man, just leave. You're gonna mess up our prank. And I could see both of their heads, these two people inside the car, and they were talking. And obviously I don't know what they said, but I imagine this is what they said, right? She was like, oh my gosh, look at that, that's terrible. And he's like, yeah, I can't believe somebody did that. And she's like, get out and take that sign off the road. And he's like, I'm not getting out of the car. And she's like, well, you can't just leave it there. And he's like, well, I'm not getting out of the car. And she's like, well, it's terrible that someone would put that there. And so I'm imagining that maybe they're having that conversation. And then I guess they decided what they were going to do. And this is what I heard. I heard the engine rev. And then it hit me, and I realized, oh no, I'm about to watch my friend get killed, right? And you can laugh, but I'm serious. I was really suddenly scared because I was like, oh my God, they're gonna run over John, right? John's waiting for the signal, right? Still behind the sign. So I hear the engine rev, and I yelled over to Matt, and I said, they're gonna run over John. And Matt goes, oh my God. And we were way up the road. So we came out of our hiding places and started running, but we were way too far up the road to stop anything, right? So let's pause there and let's talk about John. John had been kneeling on the road for 45 minutes and was probably pretty tired and sick of sitting there and waiting. He had the sign against him. And finally he hears the truck, he thinks, approach, right? And stops, and he waits for the signal. And he waits for the signal, and he waits for the signal. The car revved its engine, and I am convinced to this day, if this car had run over the sign, that my friend would have died. He would not be an FBI agent today, he would be dead. But instead of running over the sign, thankfully, the person in the car simply bumped the sign, right? With his bumper. I guess to knock it down or whatever. So John, kneeling in the road, is waiting for the signal. He hears an engine rev, and then all of a sudden, boom, he gets bumped. And knowing John like I do, John was probably like, to heck with this, I'm not going to get run over, right? And so he simply stood up. Axe in his hand, Jason mask on, blood all over him, right? So now let's pause there and talk about the people in the car. This is what they saw. Satan rule sign, oh my gosh, that's terrible, take it down. No, I'm not getting out of the car. We'll at least knock it down. Well, okay. So he knocks it down. Sign goes down, and a dude in a Jason mask with an axe in his hand and blood all over him stands up right in front of their car, okay? I am 50 years old and partially deaf. I can still hear that girl's scream I've never heard a person scream like that in my life. She was like, "Wah!" like I am telling you, blood-curdling scream, okay? And so at this point, my thinking shifted. I'm like, okay, my friend's not gonna get killed. By the way, John was standing there like, what the heck is going on, right? But they couldn't see his face, so they couldn't see that he was confused. But he was just standing there. He's like, it's not a black truck. What's going on here, right? So he just stood there. At this point, I realized, okay, now they're not going to kill my friend, but we have to stop them because they are going to leave and go call the police. There were no cell phones back then. So they had about 4 or 5 minutes for them to get to a payphone, call the police. Oh my God, somebody got murdered out at, blah, blah, blah place. And maybe 5 more minutes for the cops to get there. And I'm thinking, we've got 10 minutes, right? Before we are in big trouble. So I'm like, we've got to stop them. I yelled at Matt. I said, we've got to stop them. They're going to call the police. And Matt's like, yeah, you're right. So we're running down the road towards the car. And I'm going, wait, like that, right? And then the reverse lights on the car come on. They go, right? And now I'm like, oh crap, they're gonna run over me, right? So instead of running on the road, I got off the road so they wouldn't hit me. But now I'm running alongside their car, and as they go in reverse at a very high rate of speed, they go by me. And as they go by me, I'm going, stop the car, stop the car, stop the car. And I was pounding on their hood, going, stop the car, right? Now, I still can see that girl because I was on the passenger side. She had gone from the seat of the car to the floorboard of the car. And she was looking at me through the window going, "Wah! Ah!" like that, right? The boy driving had tears going down both cheeks. And he was like, "Ah!" like that, right? He's in reverse. And I can't blame him because think about what I look like, right? I still have the machete in my hand. And I'm pounding on their car going, stop the car! Stop the... So there was no way they were going to stop, right? So they continued driving past me. I couldn't get them to stop. They got down the road. They went, and like took off, right? And I'm sitting there going, oh my gosh. And Matt goes, what should we do? And I said, we got to get out of here because we're about to get in huge trouble. And Matt goes, yeah, you're right. And he goes, man, she was really scared though. And I was like, yeah. And then we heard footprints. And John's like, what the heck was that? And we go, we don't know. It's just some strangers. And I said, we got to get out of here. We're going to be in big trouble. And John goes, yeah, you're right. And he goes, man, she was really scared. And so I was like, guys, we got to go. Let's get out here. And he's like, yeah, that's right. And then headlights. And we were like, black truck, everybody get in position. So we were like, okay. Shh, be quiet, stop yelling. So we're like, everybody get in position. All right. So we got back in our hiding places. John got behind the sign. Joe went driving by real slow with the girls. I can still see my girlfriend's face looking out the window, and she's like, ah, right? And me and Matt jumped out, and we're like, brah! And they're like, wah! And then like John was like, brah! And they were like, wah! And then we were like, ha, ha, ha. And they're like, you guys are awful. And then this is how you know you've got a good friend. I went over to the driver's side and I talked to Joe and I said, I didn't explain anything. I just said this. I said, we have to leave right now or we're going to get arrested in about 5 minutes. And Joe goes, okay. And so He puts it in reverse and he gets out of there. We jump in my car. We get out of there. We're driving on 39th back to Yukon. As we're driving back to Yukon, police car. Police car. Police car. And we're like, whoa, wonder what's going on there. Jeez, I hope everybody's okay. Right? Woo! So then we got to the party, and we were still laughing, and the girls were like, you guys are awful, you know, and all that kind of stuff. And I went up to Joe and I said, hey, Joe, when you were driving down the road towards where we were, I said, did you meet a car coming the other way? And he goes, yes. He said, there was this little green car. They were going like 80 miles an hour down that road. He said, when they came over the train tracks, they like came off the ground. And I was like, yeah, let me tell you about that. Let me tell you what happened. So I am convinced to this day, there is a 50-year-old woman who lives in El Reno who still says, I know there's devil worshipers out there. I saw them with my own eyes. They were killing somebody. I saw it. They tried to get us to stop the car. You know, I am convinced there are people in El Reno who still think that there are definitely 100% murderous people who exist in that field. Yes, yes. It was not pretty, but it's the way that it went down. And here's the thing. My parents to this day have still never heard this story. So I just recorded it, and I'm going to put it on Schoology, and I know that that puts me at risk of getting in trouble. I might get grounded from my parents. I'm 50 years old, but maybe they can still ground me. So now, of course, if you tell my mom,
she's telling you.
I know, and so my next natural action would be to kick him out of the room the next time I tell stories, right? Yeah. Right. Yeah, that's what I thought. See, I thought that out ahead of time. So anyway, so that is the story of the most scared I've ever been in my life, and that is the story of the most I've ever scared another human being. Either the kid who thought he was getting electrocuted, or the boy and the girl who probably peed in their pants as they were driving away from us, and Matt and his horrible, like, tiny chain.
You know, technically, you could like grab one and like.
I know, he's like, woocha! Woo, that stung, didn't it? Woo! You might even be bleeding a little tiny bit. Woo! Chain! I know. So.
Big chain. Yeah, if it was me, I would have followed it.
It's been there for 2 days. All right, we'll see you later, Kate.